Hi, Happy Sunday here again. In this devlog, I'm back at work on Transmission Borne, a totally original game about having to contain an epidemic from spreading. In the last video, I've explained my work on the map, the characters, and the disease, with also some other feature I've implemented as well. However, that wasn't a game. At most, it was just a nice simulation to watch and to choose a random dot to cheer on. But to make it an actual game, I had to find a way for the player to be able to do stuff which somehow impacts the game. I worked on it. My first idea to do such things was to allow the player to somehow influence directly the several rates which control the game, of which I've talked about in the previous devlog. And after thinking about all the ways I could have done it, I decided to go with a completely original action system. The way this system works is quite simple actually. There's just a series of buttons which represent all the actions. You just click on one button, read the specifics, and then activate it using funds. And using that system, I could finally implement all my actions idea. For example, I could also, uh, okay, let's take one step back. Had to do some research. And by research, I mean simply going over Google and typing all my questions about how real life epidemics are dealt with. It wasn't as boring as I thought, and I kind of enjoyed that process. Anyways, after many hours of research, I come up with enough ideas, which I decided to group into three branches. Each tree branch is specialized on one thing. For example, there's the awareness tree branch, which influences the social distancing, isolation, and awareness. You'll find out more about awareness in maybe in 3 minutes. Anyways, there's also the disease prevention, which just decreases the infection rate. There's also tracing, which can decrease the symptomatic rate and therefore help you to understand who is sick and who is not. And there's also the medicine branch, which reduces mortality rate, and also the hospital branch, which also reduces mortality, but in different ways. So that's what I came up with, and it was enough. So I just went into Unity, made many squares, I coded them, and after many more hours of trial and error, I did it. I also had to use some UI for the description and also the buying button, and that was pretty much it. Wait, there's actually more. First of all, I decided to make it so that you need to buy low tier actions first to get to the high tier actions. And last but not least, I decided to make most of the actions tier based. By that I mean that you can activate or buy them multiple times so that they become more and more efficient. In this case, if you buy the action once, it just does its thing at the normal value. But if you buy it another time, it does its thing 3 times as good. And another time, it's 6 times. I decided to put tier 3 as the max value, while other actions actually have 1 as the maximum value so that you can buy them just once. But they're either the very low tier or the very high tier. Now I also had to find a way to limit the number of actions a player can actually buy. And that was actually quite easy. I could just use funds. Basically the money you have available to buy and activate actions. If you don't have enough of them, you can't buy an action. And when you do buy one, you have to pay with the funds so they decrease in number. I made it so that it would increase every 7 to 10 days by about 30, and I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. But it's not the only resource I've decided to implement. I've also made awareness. It is a sort of indicator of how much people are aware of the dangers of the disease, and the higher this value is, the more people will go into social distancing and isolation, and it will overall prevent the spreading. Not completely, but it will definitely help. To change the awareness, you have to buy some specific actions. Now that I had passive actions, I've also decided to make rapid actions. Basically, not decreasing chances, but rather influencing directly the map and the characters. Right now, I've made just the quarantine one, which has to be unlocked by the quarantine passive action, a very high tier action and also expensive. And this rapid action basically confines many people in one limited area, preventing them from spreading the disease outwards or letting the disease get in. And it's actually pretty useful for when there's just a few infected. I also have an idea for another rapid action, the scan rapid action, which scans an area to look for infections which weren't detected, but I haven't actually made it, at least not yet. If you do have an idea for a third rapid action, let me know in the comments. I was pretty happy about all the stuff I've managed to do and all of the features which I managed to put. And I remember that I actually had to test the game because you can put 1,000 features in a game, but this doesn't make the game fun. And I was right. Because as soon as you got one infection, 10 others would appear. Two of them would disappear, and the game would just end because all of the infected would just either recover or die. So it was just way too fast. You couldn't even recognize when it started and when it progresses and when it ends. It just does within 1 minute. And I went in a sort of game development crisis. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know if it was possible to fix. I could have just given up, scrapping the whole game, or I could have tried something. I decided to try something and I slowed down the game. By that, I mean that I extended the duration of the in-game day from 1 second to 2.5 seconds. Now, the incubation period is longer, so is the sickness period, and so is the recovering period. And it actually worked. Now that it was about 2.5 times slower, you can actually recognize all the phases of the epidemic. The beginning, the first wave, the peak, and then the downfall. Even with the initial problem of it being way too fast, now that I had fixed it, it almost felt magical to watch describing realistically most epidemics. Obviously, the conditions are way too different, but overall similar. And I was happy with the result I've managed to obtain. Not by giving up, but by finding solutions to the problem I encounter. Now, to make it completely a game, I had to add three things: a main menu, a pause menu, and a way to win and lose. Its main menu, I made a new scene. A scene in Unity is a folder which contains all the game objects in it and can either be activated or destroyed. And in the main menu, I've put a button which deletes the main menu scene and activates the game scene so that the game can start. Then I've made a pause menu which is toggled using the escape button from which you can either just resume the game or return to main menu, which destroys the game scene and opens up the main menu scene. So now there's a main menu which looks better instead of the game just starting. You can also pause it, which actually stops all the game. And now I had to add the option to either win the game or lose it. I now needed a system which would decide whether the player wins or loses. For the player to win, I went with them having to completely eliminate the disease. This means that there must be no infected people and also no incubated. Once such situation is detected, the game waits a couple of seconds and then the winning tab shows up, while the game also freezes. Then the player either has the chance to restart and play again or get back to the main menu. For the player to lose, instead, the situation must get out of control. I wasn't exactly sure how to make it so, but it was actually pretty simple. I made a score value which the player wouldn't be able to see, which changes depending on the number of infected and recent deaths. And if it goes below zero, which is the minimum value, the player loses. When the player loses, again, the game freezes, and the tab showing out the results of the game, the fact that you lost, number of infections and deaths, and then again those two options, either restart another game or get back to the main menu. But given that the player didn't have any indication of what the score is, I didn't want them to just lose immediately without noticing. For that, I've taken some inspiration from the video game Astroneer, in which when the player takes damage, the wedges become red. So I applied something similar in my game, where if the score is slightly low, the wedges are yellow and kind of small. But when it is very low, the wedges are white and red. This way the player has a clear outcome. They know when they win, they know when they lose. This way they can also try to improve their methods and perhaps getting better at the game or even mastering it. But you never have a real guarantee whether you're going to win or lose. After all, you can't decrease the chances, but never to zero. And after all, there's these chances. You could either get unlucky or lucky. Perhaps a disease will last 10 seconds because it managed to infect no one, or it could last 10 minutes despite your best efforts. You never really know, and you don't really have a way to tell. And that's the beauty of it. It's all about chances. I hope you've liked the video. I hope you've enjoyed finding out about this project development and that you're going to keep following it. And as always, see ya in the next devlog.